The month of July is Disability Pride Month, so happy Disability Pride Month to everyone. We do always have closed captions on our conversations, so if you would like to use that feature, feel free to turn on the closed captions for yourself. If they're more of a distraction for you, feel free to hide them as well. You can use either way, but happy Disability Pride Month to everyone. And now I get to introduce today's guest, Ricardo Gonzalez. I'll give his brief introduction with his formal bio, and then I'll have him introduce in his own way. But Ricardo is the founder and CEO of Bilingual America. He is an author, consultant, and public speaker. His books include The 6 Stages of Cultural Mastery, which we will talk about today, The 6 Stages of Cultural Sales, The Cultural Transformation Manifesto, and the 12 Hidden Truths to Learning Spanish. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and bring Ricardo to come to the conversation. Welcome. Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing great, Natasha. How are you? Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Oh, yeah. And, I read your formal bio, but I'd love to get this conversation started. What's something that we don't know about you from your bio, or as my fiance would say, your 5 to 9?
My father was one of 27 children from the mountains of Puerto Rico, two women, and my mother was an orphan from the state of Kentucky. And I actually have a book that is coming out next year called Puerto Rican Hillbillies. And the subtitle is Coming to Grips with Your Half-Breed Heritage. So I grew up in a bicultural, very dysfunctional bicultural home. And it was a very interesting experience. I think really drives the work that I do today and have done my entire life. So.
Yeah, well, I'm excited and eager for that book to come out.
Well, there are a lot of us who are bicultural, right? And so it's this incredible, there are 2 things that we struggle with. One is identity, which is who do we believe we are? And the other one is identification, which is who do other people believe we are, And it's a great struggle for bicultural people. And so I think it's going to be a very helpful book. So we're excited about it. Yeah.
So to, really jump in talking about culture, first and foremost, how and why did you get into the field of culture?
Yeah, really my background. I just saw all of this, I didn't know it when we were growing up in it, right? But just the cultural dysfunction between the 2 families, it's kind of like the Hatfields and McCoyas, and the families didn't get along. There was so much cultural difference between the families. I had one grandmother who's going, "Now, Ricky, I told you not to do that, Ricky." And the other one's like, "Pero Ricardito, ¿para qué te pasa, mi amor?" And, I always gravitated to the Latin side of things. And so like in our home, we speak Spanish. My youngest daughter was born in Puerto Rico. And so that's always been like my love culture. And I had to really work hard to come to embrace that Southern culture in me from my mom's side. But I realized that until I did so, I was not a whole person. And so I think just my own experience, Natasha, with culture, with the biculturalism, and very frankly, a very deep level of dysfunction between the cultures, that I realized that, I wanted my life work to be to bring people who are very different from each other to come to endearment together and learn to really love each other in spite of cultural differences and nuances and frameworks. I have this belief that we don't have to agree to love each other. And most of us, we're not divided because we disagree. We're divided because we're disagreeable, and we have this opportunity that all of us have to start making some foundational decisions. What we're going to do with our culture. Are we going to really work to bring it together? Or are we going to continue in our divisions because of our differences of viewpoints? And so my mission, my goal is to bring people together. I prefer to cuddle people in than call them out. And so that's kind of where I'm at, but a lot of it is coming so much from my background. Right.
Yeah, thank you for that, Ricardo. And I'd love, to level set the audience. What is culture and how do you define culture?
Yeah, so culture is the aggregate of 5 elements: beliefs, which drive values, which drive norms or expectations within a society. are within a culture. And then the expression of the beliefs, values, and norms are language and symbols. And so every culture, to be properly called a culture, must have beliefs, values, norms, language, and symbols. That's a culture. So what's fascinating to me is, like, say, if we go into a large organization, and let's say you're sitting in a C-suite and you have a CEO, a CMO, a CSO, chief diversity officer, you have all of the C-suite there, maybe you have 8 different people there, and you ask them blind now, privately, write down, define your culture. The most amazing thing happens. None of them agree. Ever. They never all say the exact same thing. So if the general leadership of a large organization isn't able to properly define their culture, because most of the time they don't actually know what culture is, beliefs, values, norms, symbols, and language, then it becomes a very difficult thing for people to do within the rank and file of the organization. So beliefs, values, norms, language, and symbol. That's a culture.
And how do you align those leaders to understand what a company's culture could and should be?
Well, so what I do is I work with companies to develop a culture statement. We're big on mission statements, we're big on vision statements. I personally believe that every organization should have a culture statement. And that culture statement should be very clear as to, these are the things we believe. These are the things that we value coming out of those beliefs. And these are our norms. These are the expectations we have for people who are within this culture. And this is the way we will speak with one another. So language doesn't have to be Spanish, English, French. It can just be the way we speak with one another. We're seeing that a lot in today's world, where there are certain things that 20 years ago people would say and nobody would even think about. And today, for example, on your name, you have she, her, hers, right? And so we're becoming much more in touch with the importance of words, right? And so language isn't just as we have traditionally thought about language, it's also how we speak with one another. And then, of course, the symbols, which, like you've probably gone, you're in Boston there, but maybe you go to some sort of ethnic festival or something of that nature. And it's always around symbols, food, folkloric dance, dress, and they only hit on that one element of culture. But you go to these festivals and they're really not talking about the beliefs within that culture. They're not really talking about the norms and values within that culture. And so there's a missed opportunity that we have in these ethnic festivals to be able to actually share our real culture. There's been work done on this by multiple authors. One theory is called the Iceberg Theory, where most people just see the tip of the iceberg, right? But beneath that iceberg is the real depth of the culture, right? And so is that what you're seeking? I'm just trying to.
Yeah, thank you. And I have seen multiple people in the chat say that culture statements are a really great idea that it sounds like for some people is a brand new idea. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I think it's original with us. I had never seen the idea before. We started working on it first with a community college in North Carolina, and it became a very powerful tool within that organization, because one of the challenges that large organizations and communities are facing is we have really done great at bringing in diversity in a lot of ways, maybe not so great sometimes in the inclusion area, but we live in a very diverse country. And I think we can all agree that that's the case. But when you bring in great deals of diversity, you also bring in multiple subcultures, right? And so what happens in a large organization or a community is that if we bring in a lot of diversity and we bring in all of these subcultures, if the macro culture is not clearly defined, if the macro culture is not really accepted by the people within those diverse groups of people, we lose the definition of the actual organization and we become an aggregate of all of these different subcultures trying to find a way for themselves. And I think that that's something that organizations have to really take a hard look at.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm in total agreement. And I'd love, as we move into talking more granular, if we could walk through a little bit of the 6 stages of cultural mastery, or what some of those most important pieces are.
So 6 stages of cultural mastery. I wrote a book called The 6 Stages of Cultural Mastery, which somebody asked me, what's the book that most impacted your life? And it's like, they're thinking, but the book that most impacted my life was this book because of just how it changed my life, because it has done so well in the marketplace. And so it really created a big shift in my own life. But the book was really reverse engineered, and it came out of, I would hear people talk about cultural tolerance, and every time I heard it, it just didn't resonate with me. And I said, no, there's got to be a better way. And then I started thinking, I have a ministerial background, and I started thinking of this wisdom literature says the greatest of these is love. And how do we move from a position of cultural tolerance where we're just kind of gritting our teeth at each other and just somehow figuring it out and getting by, to what I call endearment, which is the sixth stage of cultural mastery? How do we get to where we're mutually endeared to one another? And we have to get there for a couple of reasons. Number one, only people who are truly endeared to one another or love each other will sacrifice together for the common good. Until we're endeared to one another, we won't give up our own personal tight agendas. We won't sacrifice for the common good. So endearment is critical to get there. The other reason it's critical is that no one ever feels like they belong until they feel loved. You know, getting people to feel tolerated will never get someone to feel like they belong somewhere. So we have to get to this sense of endearment, okay? So that was stage 6, and that's where the book started. The book didn't start with stage 1. It was reversed engineered from there with this belief of, I just cannot accept cultural tolerance. And I think we should do away with the term. I saw Dr. White wrote, words matter. They do matter. You know, and out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. And words come from what's inside of us. And what was inside of us as a society was, let's find a way to somehow be multicultural, not touch each other too deeply and just tolerate each other and let everybody just do their thing. But that's not good enough. We want to find cultural endearment. So I started working backwards, and actually this whole thing came to me in about 10 minutes on a Delta napkin on a flight to a conference. And then I taught it in the conference just to see how it would fly. And it was amazing. And we started getting feedback on this. So stage 1 of cultural mastery is education. We don't know what we don't know. And most of us know very little about other cultures or people from other cultures. And by the way, I've done a lot of work, even with DEI people. A lot of diversity, equity, inclusion leaders do not have a real strong handle on culture. They're different things, right? And so education, one of the things that we always say is we can't lead people to the highest levels until we know them at the deepest levels, because we won't be culturally relevant with them. So in the book, I give very specific strategies on how do you culturally educate yourself in ways that are meaningful, but in ways that are non-offensive to people. The second stage is engagement. How do we engage with people of other cultures in safe ways, but in deep and meaningful ways where we really get to know them and they really get to know us? So that's stage 2. Stage 3 is empathy. And most people, I think, misdefine empathy. You know, the most famous people speaking on empathy are Brene Brown and Simon Sinek. And both of them are wonderful and great leaders and authors, and I love them both and I read them both. But I think they have the term empathy incorrect. Okay. Empathy comes from a Greek term, empathos, which means in passion. Empathy is when I am truly passionate about you, your gifts, your talents, your abilities, not compassionate or sympathetic towards you, but passionate about you. Because when I'm passionate about you, that will then take me naturally to stage 4. But if I'm compassionate or sympathetic to you, I won't naturally get to stage 4, okay? So empathy means I'm passionate about you. That takes me to stage 4, which is excitement. Because if I'm passionate about you, I'm passionate about your culture, I'm passionate about the people you run with, right? And I see all the gifts, talents, opportunities, everything that's there, I become excited about the relationship. And that's excitement, stage 4. Here's the beautiful thing about excitement. Only stage 4 leaders who are truly excited about the people that they lead will be naturally inclusive. Because if I'm not excited about you, why do I want to include you or give you a real seat at the table. But when I'm excited about the people I'm working with, guess where I want them? So excitement is critical to inclusivity. And very few leaders are actually deeply excited about their people. And the reason is because they don't know them, stage one. They've never truly engaged with them other than maybe sitting across from them in the office, but that's not engagement. And they haven't really become passionate about them in stage three, so they can't get to excitement. Stage four is excitement. Stage five is empowerment. Now, when we become excited about the relationship, we're meaningfully at the table together. We're setting vision together. How do we empower that vision? Only stage five leaders will be naturally equitable. And only empowering leaders are in stage five. But we have to have something to empower. One of the things that I like to say is that leaders who are empowering will never want to hold power over other people. In Spanish, the verb is poder, which means to be able to. To empower someone means to give them the ability to accomplish something, to give them those resources. I think a lot of times we don't truly understand the whole sense of empowerment, but empowerment is critical to address our social justice needs. If we don't have empowering leaders by nature, stage five, they won't do it naturally. It'll have to be policyed. It'll have to be frameworked. And that's what's happening within a lot of companies. We're creating policy where we actually need to be transforming the leadership. Stage six is endearment. We love each other. It's the key to belonging. It's the key to collaboration. And it is the capstone of all our relationships, which should be love. Those are the 6 stages of cultural mastery. And one other thing on the 6 stages of cultural mastery, they're the perfect balance between the hand and the heart, okay? If you look at the 6 stages, you have education, engagement, and empowerment, which are all proactive things we do. Empathy, excitement, and endearment are all matters of the heart. The perfect leader, multicultural leader, has a balance between the hand and the heart. They both have to be there. This can't be fabricated by policy. This has to be created through transformational training. So that's what we're doing with 6 stages of cultural mastery. So thank you for.
Yeah, thank you for walking us through those different stages. And I'm curious, so with these stages, is it something that you can ebb and flow? Can you be in stage 3 and progress to stage 4 and kind of reverse back to stage 3? How does that work?
Well, it's actually pretty linear, and depending on the relationship you're in. So whether you're in a relationship with a broader culture, or you're in a relationship with another person who's diverse or different from ourselves. And by the way, diverse just means different, right? And so a white person from Alabama can be diverse from a white person in Boston, which you're in Boston. So there can be diversity. A person from Nigeria is different from a person from Ghana, right? So sometimes we have made the conversation about color when I always like to think in terms of this. Color is superficial and something no one can control. Culture is deep and something we can all create together. I love to think in terms of how do we transform culture? I can't change the color of my skin. That's just that's what God gave me, right? And that's just part of who I am. I can't control that. If we had these deeper cultural conversations and address the true dysfunctions within our cultures and the dysfunction in our relationships, but going back to your question, they are linear in the sense of I move from one to the next, but here's what happens a lot of times. Sometimes you're in a relationship with someone and you're in stage 5, but they're in stage 1. And what people are doing with 6 stages of cultural mastery is it's giving this incredible framework of being able to ask themselves, where am I really at with this person? And where am I really at with this culture? And it allows us to have those hooks into the culture and into the relationship. But what we see more often than not, Natasha, is that the ideal, right, is that we're both in stage 6 together. But the reality is a lot of times someone may be in stage 6, but the person that they really wanted to collaborate with or work with or relate with is in stage 2. And so we have to come back and grow together. And I think that's important. I think it's really critical in today's discussion around social justice. You know, we're seeing different groups of people speak to this matter in different ways. The ideal would be is if we could bring all parties together and have them grow together to stage 6, because then we'd really get something done, right? And so it's a fascinating thing and a different way to look at it, perhaps. But I think that's what we're seeing most, is that you have this parallel between this person and this person, or this person and this culture, and they're going, okay, how do I get this culture to love me back as much as I love it, right? Or this person, and so on and so forth. So one of the things that we're toying with is cultural mastery for blended families, and looking at how we might take the principles of cultural mastery, which right now we're really applying more to corporate and communities, and apply them to blended families, because there's a great deal of challenge there as it relates to bringing cultures together.
Yeah, that's interesting, and we will keep an eye out for that. I did have a question about, so for companies that are quite large, when we're talking about, you know, engaging and being excited about people, if we have companies that are really large, how do we get to know the people in the company and be excited about them?
It's a great question, and the answer is really an answer of bandwidth. You know, the way companies are structured, you know, if I'm a division manager, right, my point of endearment, let's say I'm a national head of sales, right, and I have 12 sales regional managers under me. You know, maybe my point of endearment can't be with the general field salespeople, but it certainly needs to be with these 12 regional sales managers, right? So there is a question of bandwidth when we look at the 6 stages of cultural mastery. We can't fully invest ourselves emotionally and mentally and physically into every relationship. We have to choose, right? And so there are people, for example, who they want to reach a certain group of people. And so they, like with cultural mastery, we also offer what we call cultural concentrations. And so this allows people not only to learn the principles of the 6 stages of cultural mastery, but in the training processes, we allow them to choose different cultural concentrations. So for example, there's one in African Americans, there's one in Hispanics, there's one in LGBTQ+, there's one in millennials, there's one even in C-suite culture. You know, so depending on which group of people and we always challenge our students, and we say to them, choose your cultural concentrations based on one of 2 factors. One, which group of people do you most need to reach and to be able to work with? The other, stretch yourself. Which group of people do you have difficulty connecting with, right? I'll give you an example of this. We have a group of, and I'll be honest, right? We have a group of conservative ministers in the state of North Carolina who wanted to go through cultural mastery. And I challenged them that when they chose their cultural concentration, that they would choose a group of people with which they have difficulty connecting. And 60% of those ministers, and it was a large number of ministers, chose LGBTQ+. And it was transformative for them because they had no idea from a standpoint of just education what the factors really are within that community. They just didn't know. All they knew was from their standpoint, from their cultural perspective, this is wrong. And that was it. But once they started educating themselves, there was a huge shift in the way that they would start to talk about the LGBTQ+ community and the way that they would address it in their churches. It just made a huge difference and shift. Education is the foundation, right? We don't know what we don't know. I mean, a lot of times we use the word ignorance, like to be off-putting or down-putting of someone, but ignorance just means I don't know, right? And if someone doesn't know, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to try to cuddle them in, and I'm just going to try to help them through that so that they can get they can be a better human being. They can be a better person. They can be a more effective person. You know, we always talk about, we want to do 2 things. We want to expand our influence, which means we need to be able to work more effectively with more people, right? And we also want to protect our brand. We need to be able to talk in ways and use language that is not offensive to people unnecessarily. And right now I talk with a lot of corporate leaders, as I'm sure I know Dr. White does and your group does. A lot of people are walking kind of on eggshells. They're not sure what to say to who, how, or when, right? And this is the reality that we're living in because people are afraid to say the wrong thing. So I think having this kind of cultural intelligence, this kind of cultural development is critical for leaders in the world that we're living in. And so just, we're all in the same work, maybe approaching it from different angles and from different viewpoints in different ways. But at the end of the day, all of us should be about bringing people together. All of us should be about creating a better world for everyone. And that doesn't mean everyone has to think like we think. It just means that everyone has to have enough endearment towards each other that we love and respect one another.
Ricardo, I appreciate you for sharing specifically the story with the conservative ministers. That was a really impactful for me to hear that perspective and for you to highlight ignorance. I think I've said on intentional conversations a few times that I think ignorance gets a bad rap when we are all ignorant to something. And talking about specifically, corporate leaders, I know working with leaders, often they're interested in, what's the level of toxicity in our culture? What is wrong with our culture? How can we solve for whatever this problem may be? So how do you measure toxicity in a culture, truly?
So I don't use the word toxicity. I use the word dysfunction. And it's fine if somebody else wants to use the word toxicity, that's fine. I measure it in the relationships themselves, because I believe that things like, now this is for everyone to think through, right? But this is where I'm at with this. I believe that bias is very real. I believe that racism is very real. I believe that there are many stereotypes. This, for your audience, you know this about me, Natasha. I lived in the Dominican Republic for about 8 years and back into the United States because, COVID is we have more freedom now, and I've been asked for a lot of speeches, and so I needed to be back in the US. I'm living in Georgia, and, you look at me, I'm a white guy, right? Pero si te hablo español, pues bien, perfecto, But I went to get my Georgia license, and the guy at the counter, he looks at I had a Florida license and I was transferring over, and he looks at me, and it's the first time I've ever been asked this question in the United States. And he says to me, "Are you a US citizen?" And the only reason this guy asked me that is because my last name, right? And so I could have gotten upset about that, and I didn't. Again, I'm a cuddler. I like educating people, and so I said to him, yes. And my wife was at the next counter, and I said, by the way, she's Puerto Rican, born in Puerto Rico, and Puerto Ricans are US citizens. And so tell the guy next to you not to ask her that question. And that was it, right? But it's one of those things where that's just dysfunction. That's ignorance, right? And I could get mad about that. I choose not to get mad about those things. I choose to stay in grace. And one of the things about endearment is when we're endeared to one another, we have much more grace to each other, right? And there's more love. I want to come back to your question. I just had a blanked out because I went somewhere else. And repeat your question.
The toxicity and how you don't use
so on the dysfunction. So okay, so I know where I was going with that. So bias, racism, stereotypes, those are symptoms of the deeper dysfunction in the relationships themselves. In other words, if people were culturally healthy and skilled, we would not have bias, stereotypes, and prejudice. The parts make the whole in an organization. In other words, the organization is made up of people. If we heal the people, we heal the organization. So I'm a believer of treating this as an inside-out job. I want to heal the people. I want to transform what I call cultural mindset and skill set. So to me, mindset is how we view each other, which will address things like bias, stereotype, prejudice, racism. Those are all mindset issues, right? And I know they all have a tangible outworking. I understand that. But skill set is how do we connect and how do we create and how do we collaborate with one another? The most amazing thing happens when people are culturally healthy and skilled. They don't have negative bias. By the way, empathy is the tipping point of bias. This is really cool. All right. So only when I'm passionate about you will my negative bias transform to positive bias. All of us know that we can't eliminate bias. Many studies on this. Okay. We can take it from unconscious to conscious. We can take it from implicit to, we can do all that, but we can't eliminate it. But what we can do is we can transform it from negative bias to positive bias. And that happens when we have true passion towards people. I can no longer be negative towards you when I'm passionate about you. And that's stage 3. And so, but what we really want to do is we want to get down beneath these symptoms of racism, bias, stereotypes, prejudice, all of these things, which are real, they're existing, they're painful symptoms. But if we can heal the dysfunction at the deeper level, now we have something special. Now we transform people, right? And people not only will act differently, they will treat people differently. And what we've seen, no matter Caucasian, African-American, Black, from other countries, Hispanic, people of color, it's transcendent. All of us have things that we have to work through in the way we view and treat other people. None of us are exempt from this. Just because I'm a minority does not make me culturally healthy and skilled, right? And so what we've seen is if we can strategically train and transform the right people, we start to transform that department. And when we transform enough departments, we transform the division. And when we transform the divisions, we transform what? Too many companies are trying to policy this rather than actually do the hard work of transforming their people. And I think that's a danger that we're facing. And ideally, and this may sound a little radical, but kind of think about this. If all of our leadership to date from our historical beginnings had been culturally healthy and skilled, we would never be in the position we're in today. We wouldn't need diversity, equity, inclusion experts. These things are necessary because we are dysfunctional. We can heal the dysfunction by healing the people. We have to heal the leaders. When we do so, then things will really start to change. And everyone who's in DEI in this call, DEIB if you prefer, understands that upward push sometimes, right? And how difficult it is to get movement on some of these things, and how often we feel like we're just getting people to check the boxes, right? And always questioning, are they being real? Is it authentic? And we know deep in our souls that we're dealing with people and leaders who are not culturally healthy and are not culturally skilled. But we can resolve that. When we resolve that, these other things will resolve naturally. I'm not sure if that makes sense. I hope it does.
Yeah, and a few people specifically in the chat called out just because you're a minority doesn't mean that you're culturally healthy and skilled. So I appreciate you for bringing that to light. We are going to move into questions soon, and I know we've gotten a few in the chat. So if you have questions in mind, you joined a little bit late and you wanted to dive into something, feel free to drop those and we will move into questions soon. But I did want to unpack a little bit more. We touched on it about for companies that acquire other companies and bringing them in, how do you really blend those cultures to be healthy and skilled?
So again, it comes back to this whole concept of macro culture, right? And then you have to challenge the actual question, do we blend them or do we create a macro culture that is clear and acceptable to people, and the people who do not ascribe to that, they just can't be part of that culture. Part of the problem in the blending of a company is that we want to keep everyone. But if you're going to create a new culture, which by necessity you have to do it, because you're bringing two entities together that are different, right? And so you either going to continue to have the differences, or you're going to create a macro culture that everyone within that organization will ascribe to. Coming back again to the culture statement, right? Well, when you have people who will not live and breathe by those beliefs, values, norms, symbols, and languages, should they be within that culture? And the answer is no, right? And those are the tough decisions that many executives are not willing to make. But if it's not clear, so I think that the first thing any company that's an acquisition has to do when they bring in, they have to make sure that their macro culture is incredibly clear. The culture statement is very compelling. And then those people who come into the new culture who do not want to ascribe or will not ascribe, or just they don't, then they probably should not be within that culture. One of the beauties of cultures is we don't have to belong to one. You know, we can choose if we want to be in a given culture. Now, by birth, we cannot, but as we become adults, and especially in the organizational world, we can choose where we work, right? But again, it comes back to this problem of the macro culture. Most companies do not have a clear macro culture. And so what is there to kind of hook into? This is very difficult. So, and this is why, this is a little bit deeper thought. And sometimes I know I say things that are maybe like, might sound like it's out there, but it's not. I mean, it's thought through, right? And it's certainly studied. Think about a large organization with multiple ERGs or BRGs, right? So you have, and for those of you who don't know, an ERG is an employee resource group, or a BRG is business resource group. So take a company like an AT&T, for example. I did about 5 speeches at their annual BRG meetings, and there's like 5,000 people there, and I think they had like 14 different ERGs, right? And so there's one for women, there's one for LGBTQ+, there's one for Hispanics, there's one for military, there's one, you know, you all know what I'm talking about, right? And so these ERGs become responsible to report to the C-suite and to influence the C-suite on how to best work with this particular group of people. But what we have to understand is that those are subcultures that we have created within the organization. Where I think the organization's struggle is, what's the macro culture? What's the macro culture where all the people within all the subcultures are ascribing to? What is that? This is part of the problem we're having in America right now. There is not a macro culture to which we all agree and ascribe to. We're not there. And we don't have leadership right now that can help us define that. And so we have a very divided country. And even within the 2 major political groups, we have a lot of division within those groups, right? And so, and the problem is the lack of establishment of clear macro culture. If you listen to me long, you kind of get this idea that I'm really big on macro culture. I think it's really important if we're going to find our place here.
We just got a question from Andrea or Andrea, I apologize, I don't know which pronunciation you use, asking, when you acquire another company, the macro culture should evolve to enhance culture add, not culture fit, correct?
Let me read the question. I want to answer it correctly. Can you repeat the question for me again?
Yeah, it's in the chat if you want to read it. It's when you
acquire another company, the macro culture should evolve to enhance culture add, not culture fit, right? I think, and I have a daughter, her name is Andrea, that's spelled the same way, so I'll say Andrea. By the way, my favorite name in the world. So I think it's actually the opposite. The macro culture has to be defined, and the people coming into that culture have to ascribe to it.
Andrea, was there anything you wanted to ask more?
Can I come off mute, or is that not allowed?
You can.
Yeah, I am. Good point. First of all, it's Andrea, although Andrea is prettier. I sort of disagree. If you have a macro culture, it's who the organization's essence is. When you acquire another 175 or 1,000 new, by definition, in my opinion, that culture, of course, will shift. I'm not saying the values go out the window. I'm saying they should be enhanced by who you brought to the table if you're creating an inclusive space for that to happen, as opposed to, if you're coming to this table, here are the rules for engagement. That's why I pushed on it. So I'm loving the ERG subculture piece, but they're part of this macro reality. Absolutely, but I would have thought, again, a lot of people want to do a culture fit, and that's why we keep hiring the same people who are like us, because they fit. And it's like, no, man, organizations that adequately or successfully integrate or culture add or more innovative, et cetera, I think, if you can make it real. And that's the challenge. Thank you.
Okay, so first of all, I very much appreciate your perspective. When you look at an acquisition at a high level, the companies right now are making acquisitions based on the return on investment of doing so. They need to be doing so also looking specifically at that workforce and the employees within that workforce to see if there is a good fit within their existing culture. Because if not, we're all evolving. We'll evolve until we die. And then beyond us, the world will continue to evolve. So that's going to happen in any culture. But my point, and I don't know that we're that far away from each other, Andrea. My point is that the company that is acquiring and bringing others into their culture need to have a very established and very clear macro culture. Because here's what will happen. If you have a very quick evolution or a quick change, you bring in another company, right? And you bring in a new group of people, you also have the potential very quickly of alienating or excluding the people who have already been with the acquiring company. So that's where you kind of can get some division and well. So I think that it's important that the people who are coming in new do ascribe to the beliefs, values, and norms of that existing organization. Now, I want to say this and be clear. Beliefs, values, norms, language, and symbols have nothing to do. Now, they may be the outwork of different cultures, but they are not exclusive, because people of all ethnic backgrounds, people of all races can ascribe to those beliefs, values, norms, symbols, and language. That's not something to do with ethnicity necessarily. That's the beliefs. You know, we could all get on this call and we could all develop a culture statement amongst ourselves. And one of our beliefs would be that we believe that all people should have value within an organization and be included in meaningful conversations. I think we'd probably come to a belief, an agreement on that pretty quickly. So a company can have that as well within their belief system. And so I'm not sure that it's exclusive, but Andrea, I would, if you would like, reach out to me. I'd love to have a further conversation with you on it. I'm certainly open, and we're always learning. And even those of us who are teaching, we're learning. I always tell our teachers in our organization, you cannot be a great teacher if you are not a great learner. So I'm learning with you, Andrea, and if you can shape and hone my viewpoint, I am more than happy for you to do so.
I love this. Thank you, Andrea, for, your perspective. And we talk about internally, a values fit is very different. And if someone doesn't fit and believe in your values, then you're going to butt heads. And that is part of the culture. And so there are pieces where, the difference between culture fit and culture add, looking at the values and the beliefs of the organization. But we talk about that internally. We do have a few more questions, and I want to give people the opportunity to unmute as well. Earlier in the conversation, Miranda asked a question about value statements differing from culture statements. Miranda, would you like to unmute and ask further, and if the answer, I see you unmuted.
I was, so first of all, just thank you so much to Nika and team for these amazing conversations. And thank you, Ricardo, for your sharing and wisdom today. It's been really powerful. So my question is really around the concept of a culture statement. In recognizing, I also found a lot of value to your comment that a lot of organizations are trying to policy this as opposed to healing people. So, with that in balance, the culture statement and your observation that most organizations don't have one. In my experience, most organizations that I've worked for do have strong, clearly stated cultural values with language and symbols and shared buy-in, and that, really living values that are more than sort of a policy on a page, but are part of how the organizations thrive. And so I'm curious how a core values statement varies from a cultural statement, or is core values a piece of cultural statement? How do you see those two things in your client work and in your research and thinking?
So values are part of culture. It's one of the 5 elements, right? But if you think in terms of what comes from what, right? Everything comes out of beliefs. So our values are driven by our beliefs. Okay. The norms or expectations of behavior within a culture are driven by our values. Does that make sense? So if you pull values out without also saying, we believe this, right? Then it's out there kind of hanging. What's it tied to? What beliefs are those values tied to? Okay. And in a culture statement, you actually lay out all 5 areas. And ideally in a culture statement, what I always like to do, just because I'm a believer in the power of 3 in education, right? And we want this to be a 1-pager because we want this to go in everyone's onboarding process, and we want them to memorize this, but I like to have 3 core beliefs, which drive 3 core values, which drive 3 core behavioral expectations. And then when you look at language and symbols, language is an expression of the beliefs, values, and norms, and so are symbols. Okay. So within a culture, symbols that, a lot of people say that culture is food is a symbol. It's an expression of a culture. The way we dress is an expression of a culture. Those are symbols within the culture, right? And so you can take this, and I'd be happy to show you an example of this. If you'd like, just pop me an email or whatever. By the way, somebody asked how they get my book. I'm going to offer all of you a free copy of my book if you'd like it. Just go to culturalmastery.com, and right on the front page, you'll see where you can just ask for a free copy of that book. I'm not trying to make money on that book. I'm trying to create a movement with that book and trying to create a real change with people. And so feel free to go ask for that book. And we're not people who are going to badger you on the backside. That's not who we are. So if you want to engage with us, then wonderful. But I think it's important to be able to get this. But values are only one element of that culture. So I think we're missing the whole, it's hanging by itself. What creates the values, Miranda? And then what do those values produce? Because those values have to produce behaviors, which are the norms, right? And so then it becomes easy within the culture to really be able to see whether or not people are living up to that. Because if you look at it kind of coldly, you kind of go, where do our issues and problems come from? We're not living our beliefs, values, and norms. We're not congruent with what we and who we say we are. And that's a problem, right?
And Nika's asked, do you have a cultural statement top of mind that you could share?
I'm happy to share it with everyone. I'll share you one blind without the name of the organization on it, but I'm happy if anybody who asks for the book, I'll make sure that you get it. And because they're proprietary to each company, Nika, I probably shouldn't do that, but we can take one and just put the blind on it and share it out with y'all. Happy to do that. But again, from a structural standpoint, I like to keep them to 1 page, because here's the other thing. If you have physical space, you can now frame these cultural statements and put them on walls and put them in offices and all this good stuff, right? And so it becomes it's almost like the declaration of this organization of this is who we are. This is how we believe. This is the way we act. This is the way we speak with each other. And that's, I think, a good thing. By the way, thank you, Sarah Phelps, for your wonderful recommendation of my book. I appreciate that. So, and then, yeah, thank you, Steph, for sharing that. So is that a good enough response, Miranda, or do you want me to go more on that? Or
incredibly helpful, incredibly helpful. I'm also a big believer of the power of 3 and brevity. I think it's a beautiful idea. And then turning it into those, visual. Thank you.
What's as simple as 1, 2, 3 and as easy as ABC, right? It's never it's as simple as 1, 2. It's always 1, 2, 3. There are whole books written on the power of the theories of triangle and pedagogy. And anybody who's into that, I'd really recommend it to you because it's really powerful stuff.
How can something be so simple and so incredibly hard too and complex? You know?
Sometimes the more we know, the more we want to let people know we know, you know? And so, you know, the beauty's in keeping things simple. You know, all truth is simple in nature. It's just how do we present it, right?
Nika, yes, I see your hand is raised and that you've unmuted.
Great. Well, first, thank you so much, Natasha, for leading today's conversation. And Ricardo, what a treat this has been. Thank you kindly for sharing so much of your knowledge and insight. This has been very rich and robust conversation. And my question regarding an example that perhaps you have top of mind was based on the assumption that this is also a statement that could be shared with external stakeholders and audiences if it's seen as a way to help people to understand how in which they show up to the space and to the work in which they are a part of. And so I just wanted to clarify that and also to get you to share, is it something that most organizations that you work with see it as valuable to not only have as an internal facing tool, but also something that they may socialize externally?
Absolutely. It is absolutely a tool on both sides. We always talk with companies about becoming a magnet company, right? And by the way, there are 3 properties of magnets. So we always think in terms of attracting and holding, but the other property of a magnet is that it repels. And so a properly written cultural statement will attract, it will hold, which in the corporate world is recruiting and retention, right? But it will also repel. It will keep the wrong people from coming to you, which will really drive down your turnover rates, which is the most expensive thing in any organization. So I think there's no question, Dr. White, that is the case. This is something that we want to use beyond. One community college that we did this with, they took out a full page ad in their local newspaper and printed the culture statement on a full page of their local newspaper. And they just wanted to say to everyone, this is who we are. Right. So I think it's a really powerful tool in that local area. By the way, Dr. White, I want to thank you for allowing me to come on here, because I know when Natasha and I talked, one of the things she says, everybody wants to be interviewed by Dr. White. And I said, I just want to be interviewed by you because my connection is with you. So let's you and I talk. And Natasha, I have to say to you, you've done such an amazing job, not just today, but before in our conversations. And I really appreciate the work that you do and what you're doing. So I think I would let her loose to interview half the time. She's great. So
Thank you so much, Ricardo.
you spend more time on the boat, Dr. White. See?
Thank you. And yes, appreciate your comment in the chat, Nika, and the other couple of comments. Thank you so much. We do have just a few more minutes left, and I know we had more questions that came through in the chat, but I wanted to see if anyone else wanted to unmute and ask their questions in these final minutes we have today, or use the raise hand feature. I saw Steph, your hand is raised. Go for it.
Hey, everybody. I was just really thinking about all of the sort of elements that you talked about, Ricardo, about getting your leaders excited, and they need to be passionate in order for those moving pieces to work together. How do you teach or train things that seem like you said they come from the heart, so they are innate to us? And so how do you teach or train something like that?
I love the question. And I will say this, one of the first things that we teach in cultural mastery is to become neutral to culture. Stop making it moral and immoral. Stop making it right and wrong. Culture is. And everyone got to where they're at culturally, honestly. They didn't ask for it. We were shaped. The statistical probability that you are Muslim today, if you were born in Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, is well over 99%. That's the power of culture. If you grew up in Puerto Rico, I can guarantee you like rice and beans and fried plantains. That's the power of culture, right? And all of us got to exactly who we are, honestly, that gives me grace with other people. One of the first things we tell people when they come into cultural mastery is we are not going to ask you to give up your culture. In fact, you cannot love and embrace another culture unless you love and embrace your own. Just like you can't love and embrace another person unless you love yourself. And so that takes that, because so many people, when they come into these types of trainings, right, they're thinking all they want to do is change me. I'm the bad person. I'm the person who needs all of this shift. And you all know what I'm saying, right? And so it's threatening to people. And so what we try to do is diffuse that. So that really helps people to go, okay. And then I think pedagogically beyond that, there's a great difference between information transfer and information experience. And we work very hard in what we're doing to get people to experience it, that they feel it. And we come at them from multiple angles with cultural mastery so that they see things from multiple perspectives. And I think it's a very, very powerful process. It's just one of those things that works. It's transcendent in the sense that it doesn't matter race, ethnicity. And we think that cultural mastery is the cure to our cultural cancer. We really believe that. And we're just continue to see how we can impact our world, just as everyone here on this call. You wouldn't be here if you don't have a desire to see a better world. All of us share that in common. We may all find and approach it a little bit differently, but at the end of the day, none of us are competing with each other. We're all working together to create a better world. And we all have to keep that in mind as we move forward. So whatever I can do, Natasha, to support you, Dr. White, I will do. But I think coming back to your question, Steph, do you go by Steph or Stephanie? Because you have Steph on your thing. Okay, I think we have to diffuse this idea that our goal is to change you. We have to get people neutral to culture. We have to get people to embrace their cultures. We have to take away some of the threatening stuff that people feel about this subject in this area. Right now, let's face it, there are certain groups of people who feel like, they don't know where they're going to be in 10 years here, right? And so we need all of us to make this work, So I don't know if I answered your question, and I hope I did. So.
Well, that brings us to the top of the hour. I think that's a great place for us to end, knowing it takes all of us. It will take all of us. And thank you, Ricardo, for being our guest today. Thank you to everyone that was in attendance, that either had to drop off midway through or is watching the replay to this conversation and joining us live on Facebook today. Thank you, everyone, for your time. We are excited to see you again next week, same time, same place, with Darnell Moore. I will give Ricardo the last words today to end us out, and thank you so much for the conversation.
I think just let's strive for endearment with one another, and let's leave this idea of tolerance. Let's stop calling everyone out, and let's start cuddling people in. If we want to really reshape our world, we need everyone to be part of this. And we need more grace with one another. We're all learning. We're all growing together. None of us are perfect. And there's a great work we can do to heal our country. And those of us who want to see that, we have to be full of grace, and we have to be full of wisdom. And so I just encourage you, strive for endearment, and we'll get there. I have great hope that we're going to find this path. So,
well, thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day, everyone.
Thank you, Natasha. Thank you.
Bye.
Hi, Nika. Thank you so much.
Oh my goodness, no, we are certainly the beneficiaries of having been able to hear from you and just share this space and have you accept our invite. And so thank you kindly.
Well, I follow your work. It's amazing. You're doing some fantastic things. And I've been following your work for a couple of years now.
Well, thank you.
So thank you for what you're doing. And I'd love to get to know you if you're open to doing so.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, and I think I have an opportunity for you. And so let's connect soon. But thank you so much for today.
I will get your email address from Natasha.
Please do. I may beat you to it.
Well,
And get
Here,
yours.
I'm gonna pop mine privately to you if you want to just.
Okay, no, that's perfect.
Just, do you know Dr. Nicola Beach by any chance?
I can't say I do offhand, at least not just by name.
She's a partner with me. She's in Atlanta.
Okay.
She is Oprah Winfrey's relationship strategist. So she's been with Oprah.
Nice.
So she's amazing. She's amazing.
Mhm.
So she's part of this group called Sister Diamonds.
Okay.
And once a year, they have what they call an international slumber party it's for women of color around the world. And they have structured this so that there are virtual conferences online, but women around the world get together in their local areas and have a slumber party together, and they learn together and they learn to lead together. So there's a lot of women in Africa. There's a lot of women in different areas and stuff. It's just an amazing thing. I want to introduce you to Nicole. I just think she's amazing. And she does a lot of work in the DEI space as well. And she's an amazing, amazing woman. Her partner is Crystal Khalil.
Okay.
And she was with Porsche, and both just fantastic women. So I sent you my email address. There's no one on the call. What is your email? And I'll send you a request and we can.
Absolutely. Please. I would welcome that. And in fact, now that you've named it, I look forward to it. So it's very simple. It's Nika, Nika at nikawhite.com. And I just also place it into the chat as a message directly back to you, but very simple. Nika at nikawhite.com.
Well, I know Natasha's not on. I want you to know how much I have appreciated working with her, and she's been very.
Thank you for that. She's great.
And she did. She actually said to me, she said, everybody wants to be interviewed by Dr. White. And I said, just you do it.
There you go. I love that. Well, it's so important to me to give our teammates, my incredible colleagues, opportunities like this. And I know that she enjoys it and she's great at it. And so it gives me a chance to be in the learner seat, instead of host. And so I love that. And today was one of those very valued occasions where I was able to have my learning hat on. So thank you.
I'll send you an email, and then we have a cultural mastery masterclass next Wednesday with Adrian Bazemore. Adrian's the international director of restaurant training with Chick-fil-A.
Nice.
African
Nice.
man. He's probably one of the more culturally skilled men I've ever met. It's just amazing what he's done.
Wow.
He was with Coca-Cola before that. He was a client of mine with Coca-Cola, but we do these once a month. You guys do weekly. I can't keep it up.
Only because of my team, I will tell you, because you're right. It is a heavy lift.
It is a lot of work, but incredible work you're doing. Thank you. I'll send you an email here early next week, and we'll connect, and we'll have a chat together and see, at the very least, have a good friendship. So,
okay, that sounds great. Look forward to it. Thank you, Ricardo. Take great care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hello, Mr. Ricardo, could you also save your chat? I just wanted to ask you to do that because
I think he's already jumped off, but I will tell you that the fact that you joined this conversation today, you are going to receive later this afternoon or Monday at the latest, a link to the recording, as well as a link to the transcript that was placed of all the content that was placed into the chat. Okay.
Thank you so much. And I just echo the wonderful work you do. This is just my second one of joining you with, and it's just amazing. So I thank you so much.
Thank you kindly, Precious. You'll have to make sure you go back and check out our some of our replays. We've been doing this for over a year now, so we've had such great guest co-hosts.
It's just been amazing. So thank you for that. Thank you so much.
You're very kind. Thank you. Take good care. Bye-bye.